good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I hope you enjoyed your first session for those of you who have been with us throughout the morning. I am Candace Alfred Weber. I serve as Chief of Partnerships at the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children. Before we dive in, for those who are just joining us, I do want to just give a few quick housekeeping items just to ensure a smooth experience as you participate in this particular workshop. So first, you can chat with the speaker or myself by utilizing the chat box. If you are having any tech problems, feel free to chat me directly. If you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A box. And so we will have time for Q&A at the end. So don't hesitate to add your questions as we go along. And so at this time, I am honored to introduce Aaron Merkin. He is the Executive Director of Policy and Programs at the U.S. Chamber Foundation. He works on the Chamber Foundation's early childhood education portfolio, leading efforts to educate policymakers, state and local chambers, and early education advocates on the business's role in early education to promote investments in the workforce of today and tomorrow. Before joining the Chamber Foundation, Aaron worked at the National Association for the Education of Young Children, or NACY. He was the Assistant Director of Federal Policy. And so there he led the association's engagement with Congress and efforts to elevate the voices and needs of the early childhood workforce. Earlier in his career, he was a senior policy associate at Results Educational Fund, where he collaborated with a diverse group of organizations to promote an integrated, comprehensive global agenda for children within the U.S. government and researched innovative funding mechanisms for early interventions in low-income nations. Aaron holds degrees from South Dakota State University and the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education. It is my pleasure to welcome Aaron, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks so much, Candace. Really appreciate the introduction and very much appreciate the opportunity to be here. Uh, I have worked for the U.S. Chamber Foundation for almost 5 years and have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and so just constantly thinking about childcare one way or another. Um, at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, we really view our purpose as harnessing the power of business for good. It was not quite almost 10 years ago that the Chamber Foundation released our first um, sort of tentpole brief on childcare. It was called Workforce of Today, Workforce of Tomorrow. We look at childcare as a two-generation workforce issue. It's critical for parents to not only be able to get to work today, but to have the ability to thrive and grow in the workplace. And it's also essential for kids to have the foundational skills that they need. And so the goal of the chamber and Chamber Foundation, and again, I work for the foundation, but the goal is to make sure that anybody who wants or needs to enter the workforce, they don't face childcare as a barrier. So we support flexible childcare, we support many different types of childcare, and we are committed to making sure that the childcare that we want to be available, we want to be affordable, is also a high quality. There's a lot of different ways that the business case for childcare is framed. Some folks look at the business case for childcare as just like purely dollars and cents. There are groups or stakeholders where they're like, I can't say that I'm super invested in where people feel like what they feel like they need to do with their kids to make sure they get into work. I just want them to get to work. And if supporting childcare gets them to work, then great. That is probably the most cynical view. But I will say that for those groups where just the pure dollars and cents is their motivation, we have data for that. And it shows overwhelmingly that investing in targeted childcare supports, appropriate childcare supports, has a huge benefit for the kids, for the parents, and for the businesses. Now, that said, the cynical view out of the way, the vast, vast, vast majority of businesses and chambers and policymakers with whom I have conversations look at the business case for childcare as a big piece of the pie. It is crucial to come up with public-private partnerships to make sure that we have different funding streams for childcare, because I think we all know about the crunch between providers aren't really charging the true cost of care, but they can't charge parents anymore because then parents will have to start um, finding other arrangements, including dropping out of the workforce. And so businesses can play a role in innovation. Businesses also play a role with their platform and their megaphone. I mean, again, I work on the same floor as or in the same building as the U.S. Chamber. When the business community speaks, people listen. And that it has been a huge shift in the last 5 years where childcare, figuring out sustainable solutions to find more quality childcare has been a real priority of the business community and of the Chamber and Foundation. But ultimately, and I think chiefly, the reason the business community is invested in childcare, both literally and figuratively, is because businesses are part of our community fabric. We all have our favorite restaurants. We all have um, our businesses that sponsor our T-ball teams and our town festivals. Whether it's a huge business, like again, like I live in Charlotte, so like Bank of America owns half the skyline. Bank of America is invested in Charlotte being a place where people want to come, they want to stay, they want to raise their kids. Also invested in that same vision for Charlotte, Phil's Deli, right down the street. Delicious Reuben sandwich. Family owned for 2 generations now. They are equally invested in making sure that their employees have what they need um, to succeed and to make Charlotte a place that people love. So, when we talk about the business case for childcare, we talk about removing barriers, and whether that's the business of childcare, how can we make it less cumbersome for folks to enter the business of childcare, but also how can we make it more accessible and easier for businesses to access ways in which they can make a difference, either for their working parents or for their communities. Ideally, both simultaneously. Um, and so a lot of times, whether I talk to, again, like Phil's Deli with 2 locations and a dozen employees, whether I talk to Bank of America HQ, they they're often saying like, we know it's an issue, we know it's something that we want to be positively involved in, we don't know where to start. Childcare is complicated. We hear about how expensive it is. We hear about the liability, which could be a whole other webinar. Actually, it probably is in this symposium. Uh, and so it's like, we want to do something, we don't know what it is. Most businesses can't necessarily afford to just on their own start an on-site childcare center, and that's not feasible for a lot of businesses. Some businesses who could afford to do that, it's not practical. Like maybe you're a battery manufacturer, maybe you are a grain elevator. You want to do something for your employees, but on-site care is not what's possible. And so for a long time, the employer-provided childcare tax credit has been around. Although I'm going to push back on what I just said. I wouldn't say like a super long time. It it came about in 1986, as did I. And so I would say it's like, you know, not an old tax credit, but one that probably needs to have a bit of a midlife crisis and figure out what it's doing, right? Um, And so this tax credit, it was not taken up by businesses. It was not useful in so much as the allowable expenses were minimal, and it really was underutilized. A GOA report just a couple of years ago said that in some states, the uptick of using the employer-provided childcare tax credit was in the single digits. So. You may have heard that a giant piece of legislation passed earlier this year. Some call it the One Big Beautiful Bill. Some folks call it HR 1. I'll probably refer to it most often as reconciliation, just because that's one single word. Uh, Within this reconciliation bill, there was an enhancement to the employer-provided child care tax credit. Otherwise known, the shorthand for this is 45F, which is the IRS code. And so we in the childcare community, or at least at the Chamber Foundation, looked at this as a huge opportunity to go to businesses to say, here is an opportunity to more actively participate in childcare and helping your working parents find childcare and helping your community have more childcare spots. It's a great starting point, and it allows you, the business owner, the entrepreneur, to contribute, to be proactive, but without necessarily getting into the business of childcare, which again is complicated. It can be overwhelming, and I would say a big part of my job is just how do we make the childcare community and the traditional business community, uh, you know, co-collaborators, co-conspirators, so that they're learning from each other and they're getting the best of the best of each other's strengths. And so I'm just going to share my screen here. Something that I say so often to the point that my childcare team at the foundation has started to roll their eyes. But you don't need to become an expert in childcare. You just need to become friends with someone who is. And Louisiana Policy Institute for Children are some of the best in the game. If I'm being super candid, they are the best friend that I call because childcare stuff comes up all the time where I'm like, I find this wildly confusing. So I'll call Candace and Libby. But for chambers, for the business community, we would like the Chamber Foundation to be that best friend who talks about childcare the way your one annoying friend talks about his fantasy football team. So we put together this game plan to leverage federal tax incentives for business childcare solutions. As I mentioned, this opens the door for businesses to act as innovators and community leaders without directly being an expert or a facility operator. There are three big enhancements to this tax credit, and we will talk more about these. This isn't the only slide, and I know that Alex has provided the website that houses this document so that you can go through this at your leisure. You're watching maybe a little bit of baseball playoffs and flipping through the 45F game plan. That's what I did yesterday. But so the three big enhancements that you need to know about 45F are that the expiring rule, the rule that will end at the end of this year, is $150,000 maximum credit limit or 25% of your qualified expenses. The new rule, and this applies to all businesses, is that the percentage and the amount have been raised. And so all businesses can claim up to 40% of expenses, and that is capped at $500,000. So a significant increase. Eligible small businesses, you can see there that eligibility means that gross receipts of the business are less than $31 million. Eligible small businesses will be able to claim 50% of expenses, and that'll be capped at $600,000. Now, you may be wondering, well, Aaron, that seems a little, you're already a small business. How are you going to spend enough to get all $600,000? This brings me to enhancement number two. Enhancement number two, where anybody, but especially great for small businesses, businesses can now pool resources and still be eligible for this tax credit. And this is on two fronts, businesses are now eligible to pool resources. The first front is like technically speaking, you could do that now under the old provisions. You could pool resources and still be eligible for the tax credit, but it's for $150,000, which is like, is the juice worth the squeeze? So the 500,000 or even $600,000 available is more of an incentive for businesses, especially small businesses, to pool resources to go towards an allowable expense. A huge change to that end is that now you can have several businesses who jointly own a childcare center and still be eligible to divide up the credit. And so while some businesses want to sort of be an arm's length away, and just let the childcare experts handle the childcare things, and they will pay the cost and recoup the tax credit. There are some businesses who want an ownership stake in that childcare center, and now with this enhanced tax credit, you could have, just because math is not my strongest suit, will make these nice even numbers, but you could have six businesses who each put in $200,000, and then they would each get $100,000 back and jointly own and operate a childcare center. Um, Now, aside from actually owning a childcare center, what are those other allowable expenses? And that is where the third big enhancement is introducing intermediaries. And we'll talk a little bit more about what we mean by intermediaries. Um, but it's a lot of the administration of childcare benefits, the location of childcare. Intermediaries can be like a community um, a community network of childcare providers, and we have more on that. But so those are the big three enhancements. Oh, I clicked over and then remembered that this is a PDF I have to scroll down. So again, and this is you have this to yourself, so I won't linger too long on this slide. But again, this just sort of goes a little bit deeper into what are the specifics of the tax credit as it has existed since 1986, and these are the expiring tax credits. Um, and then a little bit more of a quantitative comparison of the expiring rule and the expanded tax credit. So again, for all businesses, $500,000, 40%, small businesses, $600,000, 50%. Handful of frequently asked questions. I want to, if it feels like I'm clipping through this, it's because I definitely want to make sure that we have enough time to answer your specific questions. If your specific question can be answered on this FAQ sheet, all the better for me. If I can't answer your specific question, I luckily do have a lot of friends in the business who I'm happy to follow up with and then follow up with you. Um, so just to make this a little more tangible, let's say we have a tech corporation. Under the current 45F, they're operating their own facility, they're contracting with a provider, they have a resource and referral network. So they're spending a little over $2 million total on their childcare benefits. With the 25% facility credit and the 10% referral credit, that's a total of $525,000 that they're, I'm sorry, not credit, but benefit. That's a total of $525,000 they're spending. The credit's $150,000. So their total tax liability is $10 million minus the $150,000 credit for childcare. Now, with the enhanced tax credit, you have those exact same expenses, but now it's 40% for the facility. You apply the $500,000 cap. Now your tax liability has gone from $9.85 million to $9.5 million. So that's an extra $350,000 in tax savings. And you haven't changed anything. You're still providing the same benefits. You're still spending the same amount of money. You just get a greater tax credit and a lower tax liability. So if you are, say, a group of smaller restaurants, or I'm sorry, a group of smaller businesses, say in a coastal town in Florida, you're a restaurant, a daytime adventure organization, and a hotel, your business ebbs and flows as do your workforce needs. And you're seeing more and more that you can't get the seasonal workforce that you need because there's a lack of childcare. And so these three participants come together. They form like a business consortium. They find a child care network in the area. They calculate with that provider network how much money they would need to maybe extend services a little bit or maybe hire a new teacher, assuming there's a teacher available. And so they all pitch in to this joint agreement, and then they're able to claim their credit, which then in turn lowers their overall tax liability. So we've thrown around the term intermediaries quite a bit. This is where I'm excited to follow up both with the Policy Institute, but also with all of you. In that we are currently waiting on some additional guidance from the IRS. And so what we are doing as we are educating folks about the enhanced tax credit changes that are coming up in 2026, simultaneously, several childcare advocacy groups, in addition to my friends at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, are scheduling meetings with the IRS, with the Department of Treasury. Maybe not this week per se, but hopefully that changes soon. But to continue to advocate for broad definitions and many allowable expenses. We think that this tax credit has the opportunity to be a catalyst to get more businesses looking at childcare, to get more businesses involved in investing in childcare. It's been my experience that when business leaders start to wade into the childcare pool, they don't really wade out. And so we think this could really be an entry point for a lot of businesses to either those that have been wanting to do something with childcare, but haven't had maybe the financial ability to, or businesses for whom this wasn't really on their radar, but this is a great starting point for a conversation. And we think it's a prime opportunity for non-childcare businesses to reach out, learn more about, connect with the childcare businesses in their communities. This is all to say. So, this is a non-exhaustive list of what we mean by intermediaries. I can't tell you precisely which intermediaries will be included in the new IRS guidelines, but I can tell you that there are people pushing to make sure that as many types of support are considered an allowable expense as possible. So that could be CCR&Rs, it could be folks who use data to track capacity information, licensing guidance if the businesses are deciding to open their own childcare center. A big question that we get, and I'm sorry that I can't look at the chat and present at the same time, or maybe you can, I just don't know how. I shouldn't say I can't do that. I don't know how. But a question that I've been asked several times just since HR1 and reconciliation passed is, do stipends count? And the shortest, most honest answer is I do not know. Um, but it would be great. And so you look at like Park City, Utah, they have a system in Park City where the city actually pays a stipend to eligible households if you live or work in Park City. Uh, would that be an allowable expense? Great question. We are working on it. But also like the providing of childcare is an intermediary. And so our goal is really for chambers of commerce, for business roundtables, for economic development consortiums to like they're already very good at convening. They're already very good at bringing people to the table. So this is an opportunity to organize. This is an opportunity to come together, get parents, get providers of all different types, get businesses of all sizes and stripes at the table and think about how can we look at the tax credits that are available in Louisiana already? How can we look at this enhanced tax credit as an opportunity? Again, that guidance is going to be really handy. But get the folks in the room whose perspective you need, and start that group chat now. Connect with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. Always happy to be here. As I said, I'm in one way or another thinking about childcare constantly. Um, Employers and intermediaries, the non-exhaustive list of intermediaries that we had, find out who in your community. And again, you have just an A-plus team in the Policy Institute in Louisiana who can answer questions like this for you locally. But find out like what types of childcare are in your community, who's providing that care, what are they up against when it comes to how best to spend this tax credit? Is it facilities? Is it teachers? Is it some combination of all of the above? And then are there like large employers who have been struggling to recruit and retain the workforce that they need? Bring them to the table. Um, and then because this tax credit is more flexible, there is an opportunity to develop models that maybe would not have been allowable or not been possible under the old tax credit, either because of the allowable expenses or the unallowed expenses, probably more appropriately, or because the amount was not enough to kind of push the needle ahead for different folks. And so last but not least, and you already know this, but there are, I believe, 17 states that currently have a 45F-esque state level tax credit. This map, I should say, does include states who have passed tax credits, but like Georgia and Utah have not enacted them yet. I think Alabama does too, so we need to fix this map. But that is all to say, I do see that there are questions popping up in the chat, and so happy to use our remaining time, and I can always put that document back up on the big board, but happy to use the remaining time to have a conversation.
Yes, thank you so much, Aaron. Yes, we do have a couple of questions that have come up in the Q&A box. First is the 45F credit, is it refundable or non-refundable tax credit?
It's a non-refundable credit, so it's not money back to the business, but a lowering of overall tax liability.
Got it. And so popular question that we've all had as relates to our state's tax workforce tax credits. Can Can a business, because is it stackable? Can a business take advantage of both? So, for example, the scenario says, can a business which spends 100,000 on employees' childcare receive 50% from the federal and up to 50% from Louisiana?
So this is an excellent question, and I want to caveat this with this is how it has been explained to me up to this point, and that could change. And so just I please don't tell your tax folks, well, the Chamber Foundation said. But as I understand it, you in most scenarios, you're not able to double dip, right? But when the federal, well, and it does depend on the state, but so for example, in Utah, they set it up so that they encourage businesses to use the federal tax credit first. And then after that had been exhausted, then the Utah tax credit would kick in. So that's just one example. But I do know that in a lot of states, Florida, I believe they're just stackable, but again, not being able to double dip, but just like, this percentage. But that may change in Florida because again, like up to this point, it's been $150,000. So it sh it should not, and I'm not a tax attorney, although I did talk to one for hours about this about this um, document. So it's not like a canceling out effect, but the way that states choose to, some states might want you to take the state one first and then look to the federal. So that is going to be state by state, but uh, it's not like an automatic canceling out of the state tax credit. And uh, this is not in any way like lobbying advice or advocacy advice, but just in terms of like education, which is what the Chamber Foundation does. I would say that if that is something that folks are not worried about, but like especially curious about, again, like this is why we want to talk about this in October. So like kind of having that figured out before things kick in January 1st, being able to talk to the appropriate stakeholders within your state government just to make sure that that it is understood before businesses decide to sort of like strike out thinking they have X amount of tax credit and then have that not be the case.
Yeah, no, and I think this game plan, I mean, the education piece is going to be key, right? Especially as, Louisiana has expanded their tax credits, which go into
Mhm.
effect, January 1st of 2026. A couple of questions, more questions have popped up, so I want to keep us going.
I will say super quickly that this is an evolving document. Like as the situation changes, we will change this document and then send it like far and wide. So just want to like we are on it.
Got it. Yeah, appreciate that. Next question that popped up. So it says, as a consultant for childcare providers, what role could I play in helping these businesses and providers implement the partnerships?
Great question. I think that so if you're consulting childcare providers, uh, I've been talking to some folks at like Childcare Aware and organizations like that. I think that this is actually an exciting opportunity for childcare providers to like if childcare providers know the tax credit um, sort of inside and out, it's a great opportunity for them to sort of become advocates for the tax credit and educate the business community. And not that that's their job, and the childcare providers and childcare advocates have like a ton of different things going on. But in terms of like I hear from some providers and advocates like, hey, it's been really hard to like break through with the business community, or in some cases, like it's been hard to like get a meeting with our chamber. Like this is right up their alley, both businesses and chambers. And so I would say that like as a consultant to childcare providers, like if you want to take uh, on the role of sort of organizing or gathering the providers who you consult, and then making sure that y'all know sort of the ins and the outs of this tax credit, and then take it to them because I feel like so often, especially when it's talking to businesses, we sort of feel like we're coming with like, things are pretty rough for childcare out there, like more money is needed, et cetera, et cetera. And all those things are true. But it's just, and Candace, let me know if this is your experience as well. But it's like sometimes I have to like really proactively think about how do I frame this problem, but without being glass half empty about childcare, right? like the state of childcare, I should say, not the actual care. And so this is an opportunity to be like, hey, you've got a problem. We have a solution. So not only are we experts in childcare, but here's a tax credit that can sort of like jumpstart an opportunity for us to collaborate.
Got it. Another question that's popped up. So, would this potentially open the door to businesses being held liable for actions at centers they're supporting? How can they protect themselves from liability? And are they just writing checks or are they partnering?
I'll answer the second part of that question first. The degree to which the businesses are involved with the center itself is up to the business. So it could just be a business partnering with a center in so much as they're like, okay, we'll cut to use your words. We'll cut a check for that check. Maybe the center can adjust their hours, or maybe they can guarantee spots. So that is more in that case, the employer would be no more liable for something than like a parent, right? Who's paying tuition and then you know uh, and then utilizing that service. Um, if a business owns the child care center,
Mhm.
that's a really good question. Candace, do you know the answer to this? Because I think because even when it's on site, oftentimes businesses will find a provider, whether it's a local provider like a YMCA or like a local nonprofit network, or like a national for-profit provider like KinderCare or Bright Horizons to actually run, and then that company or that organization would then take on that liability because it's really the onsite is more the location. But if you were like a part owner of the child care center, I'm gonna add that to Game Plan 2.0. I'm gonna get some more information about that and find out. That's a great question.
Yeah, no, we probably have that scenario more often than you think.
Mhm.
So that would be a good one to follow up on. Another question is just how can we equip accountants and businesses with the tools and knowledge they need to help businesses take advantage of this? So we know that,
Yeah.
the awareness is big. I mean, even in our own state tax credits. So what would you offer for this?
Um, When the additional guidance comes out, it is our goal to have a really like the game plan as it exists now is sort of like, hey, by the way, here's some information, this thing is coming. What we want to put together is a literal step by step, like here's who you need to talk to, here's what you need to fill out, here's when you need to submit it by. It's going to come down a lot to an employer's tax professionals and their HR folks. On the HR end, it's going to be, learning about, and there are actually, well, after I finish this answer, I'll do a quick plug for another resource that we have. But it's going to be HR folks looking at like, what are our current benefits? Do we have any benefits that support working parents? If we don't, or if we feel like we need to be revamped, what is the benefit that would be most helpful? Um, and then looking at once we have that guidance, where's the Venn diagram of the most helpful benefits and also benefits for which we could receive the tax credit. Um, and then the current 45F really is just like one, it's like, I think it's like a 1888 or something. It's like one piece of paper that you fill out. People just haven't because, again, like the narrow allowable expenses and the low ceiling. Um, and so it's going to be the tax professionals and the HR folks who will probably need to be most looped in to be able to utilize this. And then they will probably have specific questions, and those are specific questions that the Chamber Foundation hopes to be able to answer sooner rather than later.
Makes sense. Just for clarification or to clarify, are the federal tax credits stackable? In other words, can both be claimed? Can you just answer that once more, just for clarity?
Yeah, yeah, and completely understand if the first attempt was not like super clear. So, part A of the answer is it's going to be dependable on state, the way that these tax credits interact. Um, Part B to the answer is that they don't cancel each other out. But part C of the answer is the degree to which they are stackable will depend on how the state law or the state tax credit is written or administered. And I'll point to Utah as an example of they want businesses to utilize the federal tax credit first and then document that they have done that. And then then the Utah credit would kick in. And so that is a form of stacking, but it is also an order of operations that is specific to sort of like verifying that you have already utilized the federal tax credit. Whereas there may be some states, and I have a meeting later this week, but I'm following up with Florida, for example, where because of the level of the federal tax credit and the amounts that businesses were spending, they pretty easily were able to claim both the federal and the state. And so um, that doesn't change just because the amount goes up, but uh, it could change how states approach which pot of money should be utilized first. Or in some states, hopefully, ideally, they'll be like, okay, we have, let's say, a $50,000 state credit. Now you just get $550,000, right? Um, but it is going to be a little bit one state to the next in terms of how those credits interact.
And are these credits, so like our state tax credit is also tied to quality, the quality of childcare. So is 45F and these enhancements, is it tied to quality of the childcare center at all?
I know this sounds like I'm skirting the question, but that is also so um, it is like in North Carolina. Um, we have like the star system, right? And so I think, well, actually, Candace, I think I'm getting hung up on what is the definition of quality rather than just being like, is it tied to quality? Um,
Quality rating. So like,
Quality rating, right?
our
Yeah,
percentage of the credit is tied to the quality rating of
yeah,
the center. And so for the federal credits, I mean, is quality rating, does that come into play at all? I think is what the question is getting
yeah.
at.
Well, so I will say that the current tax credit, the answer is no. The expiring tax credit, and then we're awaiting the newest tax credit. Sorry, I almost got sidetracked with like, how do we define quality? But I know that there are also other supports that are not the direct providing of care, and so those would not be tied to a quality rating, right? So like if the benefit is hiring someone to help your employees find childcare, or if the benefit is like a backup care option, um, those would not necessarily be directly tied to the quality of care. But I'm going to write that one down again for this very specific new provision where businesses could sort of like pool their funds and then co-own, co-operate a child care center. That's a great question. I'll say there's nothing in the law, but that doesn't mean that they won't be, I guess is where I could have started.
Makes sense. Another question that came in, another just clarifying question for the 45F tax credits. Is this for, I guess maybe about around the eligible expenses? So like, is this for paying for seats at a local center? Is that eligible? Kind of like maybe talk about the eligible expenses for it or contribution.
Yeah, well, and that is the frustrating part where the short answer is we don't know what will be eligible. We need to hear that from the IRS. The eligible expenses under the current 45F are a 10% credit for resource and referral benefits, and then the 25% credit for either on-site or near-site childcare. Uh, but the term like expanded to third-party intermediaries is in the language of the law, and then we are trying to make sure that the umbrella of third-party intermediaries is as broad as possible. And that's what we would like to see. Like there's in a small town in northern Pennsylvania, there's a plastics manufacturer and they were expanding their operations. They were interviewing people, and they kept running into people saying that they couldn't start their shift at that hour because they didn't have childcare. And so the plastics manufacturer reached out to a local like a regional nonprofit network of childcare centers and were like, hey, like, let's do some math. How much would you need to hire, one more teacher at each of your three sites? Because we pull from like these three different towns, to be able to open at 5:30 and to stay open until 7:30. And then they were like, well, this is how much that would cost. They were like, great, here's that much. Like, because like we can't afford not to have our folks have childcare. Um, and that is an example that I've passed on to the chamber folks who do the actual lobbying to be like, that's why that scenario needs to be an allowable expense, because that is a way that a local business can partner with a local childcare provider network of providers, without sort of like taking on the ownership of the care themselves, but still creating spots for their community and having their their needs at a business level met.
Makes sense. Let me go. I think there's some more comments in the chat. And then Aaron, while I'm reviewing some of the questions, or maybe these are just comments, I believe the U.S. Chamber Foundation, you guys are going to go on a roadshow, right? Kind of educating.
We
Yeah.
are.
Just speak a little bit more about that. That'll be great.
Yeah. So our goal is, once we have the yes, that is an allowable expense, no, that is not. Like once we have the red light, green lights of this, our goal is to visit as many state chambers as possible, and then while we're visiting the state chambers, venture out into smaller towns, venture out to more rural communities, meet with their chambers as well, and just go through and learn from those communities, learn at a state level, at a community level. What are your childcare challenges? What are the needs? And then what are the ways in which this childcare tax credit can help jumpstart something? And then we can also go back to DC and say, okay, here's what the tax credit helps, but here's what is still needed. And here's what we can continue to advocate for at state and local levels. And I know, I think, I can't remember if it's state TBD or if we have a hard date. If I could find my calendar, I could tell you. But we will be in Louisiana, and I want to say February, Candace, right?
Yes,
Yes.
man. Yeah.
Right towards the end of February, so we're excited about that. And then this may not be of interest, but I'm excited about it, so I'll throw it in there. But the goal is also to, as we're making these stops, bring like a camera crew so that we can actually record some of the interviews that we have with local businesses, with local providers, with local chambers, just so that we can spread the word and kind of get the stories out there where this is actually applicable and sort of like less theoretical and more like, here's a group of businesses in a parish in Louisiana. Here's what they did with this tax credit. Here's what they still need. And so like where are the gaps that this tax credit doesn't actually impact, but is maybe like closer to than it would have been before.
Absolutely. So yes, so then we will be sure to promote and let our audience know when you guys are going to the exact date you're going to be in Louisiana. Definitely would like to capture those stories so that we can better understand how they're being used, or just really to improve. Right, we're always
Yeah.
data and information to improve how these tax credits work. So, believe it or not, we are right at time. So, Aaron, thank you so much for your expertise and for the document. We know it's an evolving document. So,
Yeah.
but again, thank you for sharing with us so that we can digest it. And thank you all for joining this session. A lot of information and the resource option is available to you. This session is being recorded and will be available to you after the symposium. I do want to let you know when this session ends. So you're going to be moved back into the Zoom event lobby, but you will see a pop-up on the top right of your screen. That will be your post-session survey. And so it will be about this particular session. So please take a few moments and let us know how you enjoyed it, or just other additional thoughts that you have about the sessions as we think about future sessions for symposiums in the future. So the next session begins at 11:55. It will focus on the newest research on early educator compensation. And so you have a few minutes to network, to grab something to eat for our lunchtime panel, and we hope to see you there. Thank you all.
So